This is the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. How you doing? Mitchell Ryan was a well-known supporting actor you would immediately recognize from movies like Lethal Weapon, Liar Liar, so many TV shows, too many to name, including Dharma and Greg, Santa Barbara, Wings, Dark Shadows, remember that one? He had a long career in spite of his battle with alcoholism almost his entire life. He died in March, and his good friend, actor Richard Benjamin, joins us to talk about Ryan's book, Fall of a Sparrow, which, Richard, you say is basically his autobiography.
Because it traces really from his childhood and when he first found that he wanted to be in the theater. And then through all of his, trials and tribulations of a life, what a life actually is, especially an actor's life.
Which isn't easy to start with. And I read that, he was blessed. He felt very blessed because he had some real issues that he had to deal with.
Yes.
Were you in his life? I mean, it had to be difficult to watch him.
Well, it's funny you say that because my wife and I, and a good friend of ours that we went to school with, were in Shakespeare in the Park in 1963, a production of As You Like It, and Mitch was in it. So we knew Mitch then, and then I would say, when did we go back into his life? Maybe 50 years later. So all in that 50 years, we didn't have any contact with him. We knew, of course, of him and his career, film and TV and theater that he was doing, but just that because we had known him in 1963, you kind of peripherally follow someone that knew, and then, but didn't come back into his life, and as I say, until about 50 years later.
That's amazing. Now, by that point, he had dealt with his demons.
Yes, that's right. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So, I mean, what would you say he's best known for?
Well, theater, I think, because that was his real love, and Shakespeare. And when he talks about making movies, which, can be tremendously enjoyable or a nightmare, because there's all kinds of other things happening on a set and personalities and conflicts and all kinds of things go on outside of the actual making of the movie.
So what is his goal in writing this book?
I think he wanted to get it all out. I don't know when it came to him that he wanted to. He was already in the writing class when I got in there. Donald Freed, who heads the writing class, I don't know if he encouraged him. You should write. You are a writer. He had also, I think, performed in some of Donald's plays. So there was a real, kind of confluence of both performing and writing at the same time. And there was tremendous feedback from the class and from Donald because his writing was so good right from the get-go.
Like theater, that's the meat. When you can call yourself a stage actor, that's the ultimate, right?
It is the ultimate because you're out there for 2.5 hours sometimes where there's no net. And in movies and TV, there is a net. So it's pretty exciting.
But, I mean, you did a sitcom or you did Dark Shadows. I mean, when I was a little girl, my mother never missed Dark Shadows, right? So she would drag us home and say, oh, we can't do anything after school. We have to watch this. I was like, okay. Is that disappointing when you're remembered for, a long-running sitcom or maybe something without the depth?
An actor's life is about work. And I did this movie with my wonderful friend, Walter Matthau, The Sunshine Boys, and he's an old vaudevillian in his late 70s, and the opening of the movie, somebody says, "Hey, Willie Clark, what are you doing?" He says, I'm working. I mean, that's all they care about. That's in every actor, it's the work. And so if you can't get anything else and all of a sudden someone else offers you a soap opera, it's not demeaning at all. It's like, well, there's work. Plus, in a theater, you're playing to what? I don't know, in a big Broadway theater, 1,000 people. You're in a soap opera. you're playing to a couple of million people, and it's all the same. I think it's all the same. You got to pay the bills, and the other thing is you never know what thing leads to something else. Um, a friend of mine said an actor should take every job that they're offered because you never ever know.
That's so true, Richard. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us. If you're a fan of Ray Donovan, you know his brother had the boxing gym. Well, you'll appreciate Beau Brummel. Boxing is this guy's life. He was an amateur boxer, then boxed in the military. He was a professional boxer, and when he was done in the ring, he opened up his own gym and managed professional boxers. Now he tells his story in his book, When Boxing Mattered.
What made me write the book was that I felt I had done everything in boxing I could think of, including I've been a ring announcer, I've been a coach, you name it, I've done it. I've been a cut man, a corner man. So I said, well, what can I do about boxing now? And I said, well, how about writing a book? And so I started writing a book about boxing, and I've been interested in boxing since I was about 12 years old. And I had my first amateur fight when I was 13, which I lost. And then I kept fighting and fighting and fighting. And I was so interested in boxing. I read everything I could about boxing, and I learned all about all the old timers and guys from the bare knuckle era up to the present. The present then was the late 50s. So anyway, I maintained my interest in reading and studying about boxing history through my whole life, and finally decided that I would write my own history of boxing.
You know, you write about Jack Dempsey and Sugar Ray and Rocky Marciano, like all of these names that are, well known. Muhammad Ali, obviously. But you also say that you take on the various sanctioning bodies that govern professional boxing, and you feel like they've had a negative impact.
Yes, I wrote about all of that. I kind of hard on the governing bodies, the sanctioning bodies, because I don't think they're good for boxing. Um, because there used to be a world champion and 10 contenders in each division. Nowadays, you've got 17 divisions, and I think last counted, I had 52 world champions. And I mean, how are you going to relate to that? Like I wrote in my book, there was a time when the world heavyweight champion was the biggest event in sports. Yeah, it was. Time was when Joe Blow went walking down the street. People said, there goes Joe Blow, the heavyweight champion of the world. Nobody doubted the fact that Joe Blow was the heavyweight champion of the world. Today, if Joe Blow were even recognized, people might say, there goes Joe Blow, the IBC or the WBO or the IBF. Forget it. So my book, When Boxing Matters, begins. That's the point I made.
Well, you know what? It sounds like it's all about money.
Yeah, it's about money.
So, Beau, you have a hearing problem, right?
Everybody I know, which is a lot of people, I tell them to buy my book, and I do have a little bit, yeah. I've got a slight little bit of brain damage from boxing that makes it hard for me to understand people sometimes.
Is it any safer now?
Well, in some ways, they cut championship fights down from 15 rounds to 12 rounds, and that's supposedly to make it safer on championship fights. But some of the greatest fights that ever took place wouldn't happen. Joe Louis knocked out Billy Conn in the 13th round, and he was behind on points, so he kept his title. He would have been Billy Conn would have been the heavyweight champion of the world. And there's been a number of fights that have ended in the 15th round, and yeah, so that's the way boxing works.
All right, Beau Brummel, thank you so much. Vicki Gardner doesn't let her Lockheed Martin job get in the way of her creativity. She has now published a number of books with Paige over the last 7 years, and now she's put together a truly delightful series entitled Darby and the Dolberry Dare, The Adventures of Darby.
Even when I'm working, I'm always thinking about writing. Get up in the middle of the night, do my 2 o'clock in the morning notes. It's just one of the things I just love to do since I was about 10, and started reading mystery stories and decided I wanted to do the same thing. So ever since then, it's always been one of those lifelong dreams that I wanted to accomplish in my life. I've been working on publishing stories. This is not my first publication, but it's one that I developed and thought about after visiting my husband while he was working in Alabama. The inspiration came when I was visiting a place called Dulbury Hollow, or Holler, as they say in Alabama, starting to write a story about a robbery that happened then. And it started to morph into this cute little story about a Meite that lived in Dulbury Hollow. So that's how this story came about. It's been a passion of mine, and I've got a lot of ideas for little old Darby and his little buddies. So Darby, he's a young Meite boy, and to paint the picture of what a Meite is, they're cute, short, little furry creatures of all colors. They have long, floppy ears. They walk like humans, never wear shoes, and they have two little round head buds on the top of their heads. Big, bright eyes and big, huge smiles. They're adorable little creatures. Of course, that's a very biased opinion from the author, right?
Right. So you made up a, a whole new race of people.
I did. And Darby, he's from the village of Dulbury Hollow. He's on an adventure through the Belak Forest, and he goes deep into the Cave of the Haunted. And his dare comes from a history in the village where the village elders choose a dare for the boys of the village who have turned 10 seasons old since the rise of the last red moon. And so Darby draws the short hedgehog spine, and you can think of that as drawing the short straw. And he has dared to pluck the hair from the head of the ogre who they believe lives in the cave. And he has to take that hair back to the village to prove his courage. So though he's scared, he wants to prove to the other Meite boys from the village that he isn't afraid of what's in the cave. And so what drives him to go into the cave through the gooey moss and over the speedles with spiny legs is something nobler than plucking a hair from the ogre's head. He finds courage and something more incredible that comes out of that cave.
Okay, so we have to read it to find out what the incredible thing is.
Of course, yes.
How many books are you envisioning for Darby?
Well, so far I have 3. I have 2 additional books. One is called Darby Meets Tall Town, and the other one is Darby's Polka Dots and Pretties. Those 2 are actually ready to be published. They should be out this summer.
All right, so these Meite, do you have a little, could you make a little Meite to go with the book?
Actually, we're working on that. We are researching what it takes to make either a little puppet or a little talking Meite that people can either purchase or I can take to book signings or to book festivals to share with the little kids so they can see what the Meite looks like. Yes, we're really excited to do that for sure. So I participate in several groups on Facebook that are reaching out to parents of early readers, middle grade books, and hoping that helps, promote them. I also did a book signing at the Tucson Festival of Books where a lot of little kids came around to our booths and we talked to them about the stories. We handed out, bookmarks and magnets, did sell some, signed a few.
That's the way to do it, Vicki. Nice job. Thank you. William Ellis comes from a long line of Welsh immigrants who fled their homeland for the U.S. in the early 1800s. He details his family's journey in his book, I Got the Hammer, and it was a journey just getting this published.
I, as an individual, I started writing whenever I became acquainted with my mentor, as I mentioned in the front of the book. Manny Freed was a friend of mine, and he started a writing group, and I was part of that. And, he started out as a young man as an actor on Broadway and became a union organizer and wound up as a writer in the Buffalo area. And actually, he was the first person to edit the book. And this book was written years ago and recently rewritten several times to make it publishable. But it was all his fault that I became a writer.
Okay, we can blame him.
And I can blame him. Of course, he's passed away long ago, and I owe him an awful lot as far as being able to do anything as far as writing is concerned. He went from a struggling actor on Broadway to a professor at the University of Buffalo. And my life started off as a factory worker. That's where I met him at. He was a union organizer at one time. After 18 years of working in a factory, I wound up in California as a contractor, and I call myself a contractor for the stars. I've worked for so many famous people out here in Malibu and Bel Air and all around. And after I retired, and then my wife of 40 years passed away, I had nothing to do, so I got this manuscript I had written years ago, and I put it together, and we published it, made a book out of it. The story is basically about just family history. Most of it is people I have known, or I'm actually standing on the shoulders of my ancestors. And most of the information that's in the book, came from my mother. And it starts with the immigration of my great-grandfather and their family from Wales, and it's the coal miners and the lumberjacks of Pennsylvania and all the Appalachian Hills of Pennsylvania. And as the generations went on, we were working men and actually provided all of the raw materials to build America. It all boils down to the history of my mom as she went through her life. And of course, to tell her story, you got to tell the story of the people that she came from. She had a rough life, but at the same time, it all ended out pretty good. And here again, most of it is all based around the family. The coal miners supplied the fuel, the lumbermen supplied the trees, and the working people supplied the labor that built America. And this is the background of the Ellis family, and it's all started back in the 1800s when the Ellis family came over on the boat. There was 8 of them came over as a family, and they scattered all over the United States. And they all became coal miners on one side of the family, and then on my grandmother's side of the family, they came from Germany and other parts of Europe. This was at the time when America was taking everybody that they could help build America, make it a great place.
All right, William, thank you. John Hughes was a dentist in Frankfort, Kentucky, and a government employee until retina disease robbed him of his sight, but not his determination to write Tome 1, Arcana. So how are you writing, John?
It's through a reader program. It's the JAWS program. And it basically reads the letters that I'm typing. Or I can read words or sentences or paragraphs that I've written. So it's kind of a slow process compared to just sitting down and typing something out, but we've done all right with it. It all started as a kid. I was always fascinated with fairy tales and knights and dragons and magic and wizards and that sort of stuff. And then when I was in high school, I was introduced to Tolkien and Moorcock and Lever and Howard and Watt Evans and a whole bunch of other fantasy writers. And so about the age of 17, I started creating my own little world. And over the course of many years, it slowly evolved. I never seemed to have enough time to sit down and actually attempt to do something with it, except, for my own enjoyment. But since I retired and I'm not going to be playing basketball or, stuff like that, I sat down and just started writing. And after, I guess, the first book, probably 2 or 3 years to put together, and found out that it was going to be a trilogy. And The other two came along very quickly. And actually, the second one is with Page Publishing right now in the editing process. So hopefully by the end of the year, the second one will be out. The trilogy is called Rings of Silver, and this one is Arcana, which happens to be the first tome of the trilogy. It's an epic fantasy, like all good epic fantasies. It has good guys with bad character flaws and bad guys that have no redeeming qualities at all add to their story. It's about good and evil, light and dark, order and chaos, life and death. It's a world very similar to our own. I mean, it's not a completely unrecognizable place, but it's populated with fantastical characters and creatures and magic. There are four heroes that are in search of relics from an age long ago to help them fight an evil force in the form of a necromantic king. And they go through the entire book collecting these relics, and then they end up facing, in the end, the antagonist in the book. And through the entire book, there's hints at the history and tales from the history, and so it all kind of falls back to this forgotten age that has already passed.
Do they have their own language?
Actually, there is a one particular race in this world. It's the Crow people, and I have sort of developed a language through them. And throughout the book, all the Crow words are italicized. And if you look at them closely, they're always 6 letters. They're 2 syllables, 3-letter combinations. And if you see, for example, DIS, dis, it always means the same thing. In this case, dis means fear. So if there's Disman, it's mountain of fear. Yeah, I got maybe 300 or 400 of these roots that are basically in a dictionary that I refer to when it comes to something that I want to name in that language.
I find that fascinating. Tolkien was big on that. Didn't he write like a whole language?
Yeah, he not only wrote the language, he developed the alphabet for it, and far beyond my skills as a writer of English. He also was versed in all sorts of Old English, and so I made it as easy as possible on myself.
As well, you should, John. Thank you so much. Sophia Georgia Brown teaches reading in Florida, and her love for her homeland of Jamaica inspired her book, My Sugar Island Home.
It's a part of me. It's my DNA. So I have to share my DNA with other people, put it that way. Jamaica is the third largest Caribbean country and British speaking Caribbean country. And of course, Jamaica is known for the greatest music on earth and the greatest athletes on earth. I mean, for the size of Jamaica on the global on scale, we have to be, as Jamaicans, we have to be proud to know that our country, as our music, as a matter of fact, has polarized the four corners of the world. The great legendary Bob Marley is from Jamaica. It's a historical narrative. It tells you about the mannerism, how the grandparents were the glue to the family, how the village helped to rear a child. It tells you about the school, how things, times, and places were in Jamaica, the music, the food, the church, what children do, what they didn't do, all of that is embedded in that one book. I played what we call the Jamaican, unlike the traditional baseball, the Jamaican baseball that children play is a local baseball that where we have, 3 posts as our demarcation. We bat, and then we pick teams and sight, like a gymnastic move, not to get hit by the ball or striked out. If not, you'll be out. But those are the games that most of the girls play in Jamaica, and I was a part of that playing team. Jamaica is different from the United States because the church is is one of the central entity of the country. Children have to go to church. It doesn't matter whether you are sick or you're lame or you're lazy. I have to go to church on a Sunday, and I have to go to Sunday school, and I have to learn my 23rd Psalms, and I have to learn my Our Father, and I have to learn the 10 Commandments. That was crucial as part of every child, or for me in Jamaica growing up. I have to know those. Very important.
Would you say that there's more respect for your elders in Jamaica?
Definitely. The elders are revered in Jamaica. People will refrain from even using profanity close by to an elderly person. But they were the persons that we sought for their advice at all times. They're very knowledgeable. They are our gurus or greats. And, those are the elderly they're the foundation.
I wish there was more of that here.
No. The older you are, the wiser you become, and the more revered in my country.
Yeah. So why did you ever leave?
Why did I leave? Well, I don't leave. Jamaica is with me. Anywhere you go, Jamaica is with me. I am Jamaica. I go back and forth. I am Jamaica. And that's what Bob Marley said, Exodus movement of Ja people. So while I'm here, I represent Jamaica, and I am Jamaica.
Oh, I love you. So do you do talks about Jamaica? Do you go into schools and do presentations about Jamaica?
Yes, I am. I have been promoting my book, but I've been going to mostly target my Jamaican people, my West Indian. Yes, I do. From places to places, from shops to doors to churches and so on, where I have a strong Caribbean settings.
Sophia, I'm ready to get on a plane to Jamaica right this minute. I think your enthusiasm alone will sell this book. Okay, that is it for this edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. Writers, so much good stuff here about joining writing groups and critique groups and getting feedback about your writing. I mean, so many resources out there if you really want to write. If you missed anything, download the podcast at 710WOR.com. We put up a new one every week. Thanks for being here. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. I'll catch you next time.